In this video, let's take a look at some new GNSS data that we're importing in TPC Desktop version 24.0.4. I'm running the beta for that version. It's out in July of 24. I've opened a project here, and I've got a CSV file that I'm importing from my EMLID RS3. And I noticed that we've got some new fields in here, some new data. Origin, we're going to focus today a little bit on tilt angle because it's a tilt compensated receiver. We've got a new GDOP value in here. We'll talk about that. And then we've got some individual number of satellites for GPS, GLONASS, Galileo, the other constellations that's part of this data. So let's turn on details and let's go ahead and read this data in. Let's browse to the file that we want. It was project 02412 for Davis. And let's go ahead and import that. So Traverse PC has imported those 28 points for us. Let's come up here to the top and just take a look real quick at some of the changes here. So right off the bat, I can see that these are points 1 through 13, I think it was, that I sent out to the GNSS receiver before I went in the field, and they just had local coordinates. So it treats those as local when it imports them back in, and it doesn't try to bring in any GNSS data for those. The GNSS data comes down when I started collecting GNSS points, and I use a lowercase g for point number 6 to identify it as a GNSS point. And I was out here in May and had a little trouble getting fixes. So I've got a float on a couple of the points. So I went back out a week later with the tilt compensated RS3 from EMLID, and I want to just take a look at what we get out of that data here. And by the way, all these were fixes now. The satellites were just positioned a little bit better. Constellations were better this day. I had done the research to know when to go back out to do a better job. So you notice that the origin on this is global. That means it has a GNSS data. Here's the tilt angle. It's 0.8 degrees. When I did point H13 or point 13, I had a tilt angle of 18 degrees. So I had to do quite a bit of tilt under a heavy tree canopy to get a fix. But I did. It's kind of a nice thing about having a tilt compensated receiver. Then we come down and we give you the solution information, and the format of all this is a little bit different. We've improved this with some grouping and indentation to make it easier to read. So here's all my statistics about that, my RMS values, my PDOP, and remember I said we now give you a GDOP. So geodetic degradation of precision, the GDOP value, combines the positional degradation of precision and the time degradation of precision. So both PDOP and TDOP are squared. They're added together. We take the square root of that to get the GDOP value. And so we're bringing in some additional degradation to consider in our measurement. And we expect these to be a little bit higher than the PDOP alone, but we don't want these to be crazy. And remember, we're always looking for a value of 2 or less here to say we feel like we got a pretty good reading on the point. Then this is another change in that we sometimes now just go one time value for a fixed solution. Different GNSS receivers are going to do this differently. We can get a start time and an end time like we had up here, or I can say maybe all I'll get out of this is just a single time, and that's fine. Traverse PC just reports that as a time value. And then remember I said we have the individual satellite values for GPS, GLONASS, Galileo. These show up here and are listed individually. And then I have my base information. So all of that data comes in to Traverse PC. And if I go ahead and take a look at that Traverse now in the Traverse view, you're going to see some additional changes here as well. So here is that data that we imported. Notice that again that points 1 through 15 are those local points. So there's no RMS values, GDOP, PDOP. None of the RTK data is specified for those. That's all blank. But now when we come down to the GNSS points, I can see that here's those couple of floats that I had on the 22nd. When I came back out on May 29th, I got fixes for all those, partly because I had a tilt compensated receiver and it was able to tilt that to one point up to 18 degrees to get a reading under the canopy. And then of course we have our GDOP values. So these show up as raw data. And the nice thing about having these as raw data is that when I do GNSS averages and look for outliers, I can average the GDOP values as well as the PDOP and RMS values. So it's a great way for me to say, have one more opportunity to say, hey, I want to accept that point or not accept that point. And then remember I said that some of the receivers now give us just a single time instead of a start and end time. So Traverse PC just records that and displays that as an end time.